Hello everyone, and welcome to today's episode on chess thoughts. I am your host, and today we are going to explore a darker and deeper topic, perhaps something that we all can relate to, something very existential, a feeling at night. There's a certain kind of silence that only appears at night, not the peaceful one we crave after a long day, but the heavy one, the one that presses against your chest. That silence is what this poem, When the Darkness Comes, captures. It's not just about sleeplessness or heartbreak. It's about what happens when we're forced to face ourselves, when the distractions fade, and all that's left is the echo of our own thoughts. This quote was wrote by Daniel D. Padilla. You may not know about him, but he is a close friend of mine who is also a writer. I keep waking up, it begins. A simple phrase, but it carries an existential weight. To wake up is not only to open one's eyes, it's to awaken to reality, to consciousness, to pain. Nietzsche once wrote, "When you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you." This line perfectly mirrors the essence of the poem. The darkness in the room is not just literal, it's psychological. It's the abyss within the self, the unknown that stares back. And in that confrontation, something happens. We realize that the mind itself can be both the prison and the escape. The poem's speaker says, "The darkness of my room, it starts consuming. I cannot breathe, this suffocation. It's a metaphor for the weight of awareness. When we become too conscious, when we think too deeply or feel too much, it's as though our own thoughts start devouring us." Kierkegaard described despair as the sickness unto death, not death of the body but of the spirit. It's when the self cannot reconcile what it is with what it wants to be. And in those moments, like the poet, we reach for something, anything, that feels like air. We step outside, into the cold night, not necessarily to escape, but to remember that there's something larger than our suffering. When the poem shifts to the image of the moon and the stars, it's not random, it's deeply symbolic. The cosmos has always served as humanity's mirror. The Stoics, for instance, believe that by contemplating the universe, we remember our place within it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Dwell on the beauty of life. Watch the stars, and see yourself running with them." In other words, when we look at the night sky, we remember that our pain, as infinite as it feels, is part of something vaster, something enduring. The stars remind us of continuity, of rhythm, of recurrence. Even in darkness, there's light, even if it's light years away. But what's truly striking is the final act of the poem. I remember that I am not alone, and I will be loved again. At least that's what I tell myself. This ending reveals one of the most human contradictions, the tension between belief and doubt. The poet doesn't say, "I know I will be loved again." They say, "That's what I tell myself." It's a subtle, powerful difference. Camus, in the myth of Sisyphus, described life as an absurd struggle, the endless task of pushing a boulder uphill, only for it to roll down again. But he concludes that we must imagine Sisyphus happy, because in the very act of defiance, in continuing despite despair, there is meaning. Likewise, in telling oneself, "I will be loved again," the speaker isn't asserting truth, they're practicing hope, they're resisting nihilism. It's a form of rebellion against the void. In the end, this poem isn't just about heartbreak, it's about endurance. It's about what happens when the mind, surrounded by darkness, chooses not to give up, but to speak, because that's what poetry and philosophy really are. ways of keeping ourselves alive when everything feels meaningless. Rumi once said, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." And that's exactly what happens here. The darkness, suffocating as it is, becomes a teacher. It forces awareness, humility, and eventually, compassion. The poet breathes again, not because the pain is gone, but because they have accepted it as part of being alive. To live, truly live, means to face nights like these. Nights when sleep won't come, when memories choke us, and when we have to remind ourselves that love, even if absent now, is still possible. That's the quiet heroism behind the poem, not the triumph of light over darkness, but the courage to sit within the darkness and still whisper, "I will be loved again." So maybe, every time we find ourselves awake at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, we can remember what the poem teaches, that we are not alone in our loneliness, that others too have breathed through the same kind of night, and that somewhere, beneath the same sky, someone else is looking at the same moon, telling themselves the same thing. This has been a reflection on When the Darkness Comes. Make sure to check out Daniel's work. And just a reminder that even in our most fragile moments, we remain part of something infinite. Because every act of hope, no matter how small, is proof that the light still lives within us.